On a snowy night in a small tailor shop, a young black woman sat helplessly counting her last few dollars, surrounded by unpaid bills. Despite her need, she had to leave the house to buy food for her younger sister. Then, by coincidence, she witnessed a weak elderly woman shaking as she was being ejected from a cafe for not having any money. Despite her empty pockets, she walked into the cafe and offered the old woman dinner. But that single act of kindness would change her life forever because the old woman turned out to be the mother of a famous CEO. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. And subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The wind was relentless that December morning in Riverside, Minnesota. Snow whipped across the streets in sharp, swirling gusts, piling up against shop doors and street lamps until the world outside seemed a blur of white. Inside Abuela's Threads, a small tailor shop tucked on 3rd Street, Elvira Marta hunched over a sewing machine, her fingers raw from the cold that crept through the old, drafty windows. The hum of the motor was steady, almost hypnotic, but it did little to drown out the anxiety thrumming through her chest. Elvira had $847 to her name. That was it. 3 days from now, her landlord, Mr. Hanley, would be posting the eviction notice on the shop door if she couldn't come up with the rent. 3 days. The thought tightened her stomach. The shop, which had belonged to her grandmother for decades, was more than just a business. It was a legacy, a lifeline, a memory stitched into every corner of the worn wooden floors and lavender-scented shelves. Losing it would feel like losing her grandmother all over again. Her younger sister, Sophia, had slammed the door earlier, storming in with her backpack hanging heavy over one shoulder, a crumpled piece of paper clutched in her hand. "I missed it by 0.2 points, Elvira. Can you believe it? Just 0.2. Elvira rubbed her temples, willing herself to stay calm. "We'll figure it out," she said, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Tuition deadlines weren't forgiving. Sophia's college dreams, built on the fragile hope of a scholarship, teetered on the edge. And here she was, counting pennies to keep the lights on, while her sister faced doors that might never open. The shop smelled faintly of lavender and worn fabric. The scent should have been comforting, a reminder of home, of better days. But today, it only highlighted what was missing: food in the fridge, bills paid, security. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since breakfast. She moved to the counter, counting the bills in her wallet over and over, $20.50, and 2 rolls of quarters. Enough, maybe, for groceries for a day or two if she skipped lunch and counted every penny. Enough to get by, but only barely. Outside, the blizzard picked up. The streetlights flickered, sending shadows across the walls of the shop. Each gust rattled the windows, reminding her that time was running out. Every day brought more worry, more uncertainty. And yet, Elvira worked tirelessly, sewing and mending, patching not only clothes but the fragile hope that her family's life depended on. The bell above the door jingled, startling her. A gust of icy wind followed someone inside. She looked up and saw an old woman, frail and hunched, coat tattered, white hair plastered to her face. Shivering, the woman approached, hesitating like a ghost of someone who had been left behind. "I'm sorry," the woman began, voice trembling. "Can I get a cup of coffee? And maybe, a sandwich if it's not too much trouble?" Elvira froze. She wanted to help. She wanted desperately to. But she had $20.50 and counting. That was barely enough for her own needs, let alone a stranger's. Yet as she looked at the old woman's wide, fearful eyes, she felt that familiar tug in her chest, the same one her grandmother had spoken of when she talked about sewing. "Every stitch is an act of hope," she used to say. Elvira realized that kindness, like a stitch, could hold more together than money ever could. And so she decided. It wasn't a long, considered choice, it was instinctive, necessary. She slid $20 across the counter. "It's not much," she said, forcing a small smile. "But this will get you a warm meal." The woman's eyes welled up with tears. "Bless you, thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Bless you for seeing me. For a moment, Elvira forgot the snow, the eviction notice, Sophia's scholarship, and the gnawing hunger. She felt something steadier, warmer. A small spark of hope that even in a world that could be so unforgiving, a single act of kindness could matter. And outside, the snow continued to fall. The morning after Elvira had fed the old woman, the snow outside had settled into a quiet, blinding white. Streets were slick with ice, and every footstep crunched beneath her boots as she left Abuela's threads to pick up groceries. The wind had softened, but the cold still seeped through the layers of her coat, biting at her fingers and nose. Every movement reminded her of the world she was barely holding together. Inside her small apartment above the shop, her kitchen looked like a battlefield. Empty cereal boxes lined the counter, and the refrigerator contained little more than a half-empty carton of milk and a bag of frozen peas. Elvira scanned the shelves, calculating what she could afford with her dwindling cash. $20.50 had gone toward feeding a stranger yesterday. Today, there would be no indulgences, she would make do with what remained. Her mind churned with the numbers. Rent, $1,200 due in 3 days. Grocery bills for Sophia and herself, maybe $80 for the week if she shopped carefully. Utilities, $160. Miscellaneous expenses, at least $50. She ran her fingers through her hair and sighed, a tension that had been growing for days settling heavy on her shoulders. She had never felt this kind of helplessness before. Sophia was sprawled on the couch, books and papers scattered around her like confetti from some failed celebration. "I can't believe it," she said, staring at her phone. "I studied all year and I'm 0.2 points short. They're not even rounding. Just 0.2. Elvira sank into a chair opposite her. "I know, Soph," she said softly. "I know how hard you worked." Sophia's gaze snapped to her sister. "You don't get it, Elle. I wanted to go to college. I planned my life around that scholarship." Elvira swallowed the lump in her throat. She did get it. But she also understood the reality: the scholarship was gone, and the rent deadline loomed. She reached for the calculator, punching in numbers with shaking fingers. Every solution she found created 3 new problems. She could borrow money from a friend, but that would leave her with nothing for groceries. She could skip rent and hope for mercy, but Mr. Hanley had no mercy in his heart. The shop itself felt heavier than ever. Abuela's threads had always been a sanctuary, a place where she stitched not just fabric but memories and hope. Now, with each day that passed, the weight of bills and debt made the shelves seem like tombs of old dreams. She ran her fingers over the counters, over the neatly folded fabric she had paid for with money she didn't have, and felt the despair pressing in like the winter wind outside. Her stomach growled again, a dull reminder that her own needs weren't disappearing. Elvira pressed her hand over it, trying to focus on the bigger picture. Feeding the old woman yesterday had been the right thing, she told herself, even if it had cost her money she couldn't spare. But now, hunger and worry coiled together, gnawing at her resolve. That afternoon, she ventured back into the snow, backpack slung over her shoulder, determined to stretch her last dollars as far as they could go. Every corner of Riverside seemed harsher under the weight of the blizzard's remnants: frozen puddles, icy wind tunnels between buildings, and streets empty except for the occasional car sliding dangerously. Elvira's boots squelched in the snow, and the bitter cold bit her exposed cheeks, making each step a small victory. She stopped briefly at a payphone near the corner of 3rd and Main. The phone's metal was icy, and she rubbed her hands across it before lifting the receiver. She thought of the eviction notice that would arrive in 3 days, Sophia's crushed dreams, and the lingering uncertainty that filled every waking moment. She wondered how much longer she could keep going without falling apart completely. And yet, even as the cold numbed her fingers and the wind whipped snow into her eyes, Elvira carried something stubbornly warm inside her. That spark of hope, small but persistent, had been ignited the day before when she had helped the old woman. It reminded her, just barely, that even in desperation, compassion could exist. It was fragile, yes, but it was there. And in Riverside, as the streets lay quiet under a thick blanket of white, that tiny flame was about to grow into something far larger than Elvira could imagine. By late afternoon, the blizzard had softened to a steady, relentless snowfall. Riverside streets were nearly empty, the streetlights casting halos in the swirling white. Elvira trudged down 3rd Street, her boots sinking slightly into the fresh snow with every step. Her fingers, still numb from the wind, clutched the straps of her backpack as she headed toward Frostbite Cafe for a warm drink, if her last few dollars could stretch that far. When she reached the cafe, the door opened to reveal a scene that stopped her mid-step. A frail, elderly woman, hunched and shivering, stood at the counter. Her coat had more holes than fabric, and her hair, thin and white, stuck to her cheeks in icy strands. The barista, tall and impatient, was shaking his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said sharply. "No money, no service. You need to leave." The woman's shoulders slumped, and she looked around desperately, eyes wide. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning," she whispered, voice trembling. Elvira's chest tightened. She recognized that look: fear, cold, hunger, and a quiet shame that came from having nowhere to turn. She reached instinctively into her coat pocket. The $20 she had saved for groceries yesterday would barely cover a meal for herself today, but she knew she couldn't walk away. "I'll cover it," Elvira said, stepping forward. The barista's eyebrow shot up. "That's generous," he said, clearly confused. "It's necessary," Elvira replied softly. She slid the money across the counter and guided the old woman to a small table by the window. The snow outside made the cafe feel like a sanctuary, the smell of coffee and baked bread warm and grounding. The woman, Daniela Williams, shook as she sipped the hot coffee. I don't know what to say," she murmured. "You don't even know me." Elvira smiled faintly. "I know enough. Everyone deserves a warm meal." For a long moment, Daniela stared at her, as if trying to measure whether the kindness was real. Then, in halting words, she began to speak. "I was a teacher, for 35 years. Lost my home after a car accident. Coma for 4 months, bills wiped out my savings. When I woke up, everything was gone. Anne. I can't remember my son's contact info. Marcus. I've tried. Elvira listened, feeling the weight of the story sink deep into her chest. Here was someone worse off than she was, someone whose life had been swallowed by circumstance and memory loss, yet who still carried a flicker of hope in her voice. She thought of the numbers she had been calculating all morning: rent, groceries, bills. She thought of the empty fridge, the looming eviction, Sophia's scholarship. And she thought of the old words her grandmother had taught her: every stitch is an act of hope. Helping someone like Daniela, in that moment, was like adding a stitch to a frayed piece of fabric, fragile, but necessary. Elvira poured warmth into the small gesture, giving up what little she had so that another could be seen, could be fed, could be remembered. Daniela's hands trembled as she held her cup, eyes wide with disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Bless you for seeing me." Elvira nodded, feeling something heavier than snow settle in her chest. There would be consequences: hunger, financial strain, worry, but for the first time that day, she felt a quiet, unshakable certainty: she had done the right thing. And outside, the snow continued to fall, layering the streets in white, hiding the troubles beneath its cold, soft blanket, while inside the cafe, a small spark of connection had been ignited. After Daniela had settled at the small table, sipping her coffee and nibbling at the sandwich Elvira had bought, the reality of the choice Elvira had just made sank in. Her wallet was lighter, her stomach still growling, and the rent notice was still 3 days away. Yet there was a strange warmth in her chest, the kind that came from doing something right even when it hurt. She stepped aside, letting Daniela rest, and tried to shake off the creeping anxiety. Every step toward the door of the cafe felt heavier. Her mind raced through the bills she had to pay, the groceries she still needed, and Sophia, who would probably sulk in her room until dinner if she didn't find a way to make things right. Helping Daniela had been costly. Every cent had been precious, yet somehow she felt lighter, like she had lifted a small weight from the world, even if only briefly. Daniela looked up at her, eyes wide with gratitude. I don't even know how to repay you, she said softly, voice trembling. You don't have to, Elvira replied. Sometimes seeing someone through the day is enough. Her words felt small, even to her, but Daniela's nod told her they mattered. Once outside, the cold hit her again, sharper this time, almost as if reminding her of her own struggle. She rubbed her hands together, shivering, realizing how little food she had, how much she had sacrificed. The streets of Riverside, blanketed in snow, seemed even emptier now. Every passerby she saw felt distant, indifferent, and she wondered how many others were suffering quietly, unseen, like she had been before. Back at Abuela's Threads, she sat at her sewing machine, attempting to focus on the work she had left unfinished. Her fingers were stiff, her stomach a dull reminder of the morning she had skipped breakfast. Yet every stitch she made carried a subtle change, a quiet energy that wasn't there before. She was aware that helping Daniela hadn't fixed her problems. The eviction notice was still coming, Sophia's scholarship was still uncertain, and money was still dangerously low. But there was a shift inside her, almost imperceptible yet undeniable. She had acted despite scarcity. She had chosen compassion over convenience, humanity over self-preservation. That choice, small as it seemed in dollars and cents, mattered in ways numbers could never measure. Later that evening, as she counted the bills once more, Elvira realized that the cost of kindness was real, tangible, and unavoidable. Yet so was its reward, the quiet, grounding knowledge that she had done what needed to be done. Hunger still gnawed at her, worry still clung like frost on the window panes, but there was a spark she could not ignore. It was fragile, yes, but it burned steadily. Somewhere, deep inside, she knew this spark would not only light her way but would soon ignite connections she could never have imagined. By helping someone else when she had so little, she had opened the door to something bigger than fear, bigger than debt, and bigger than snow-covered streets. Elvira leaned back in her chair, eyes closing for a moment, and whispered to herself, almost as if testing the truth of it, this was the right choice. Even if it costs me everything, it was the right choice. And with that thought, she prepared herself to face the coming days, knowing that every challenge, every hardship, every storm, might now carry within it the possibility of connection, hope, and unexpected change. The following days carried a quiet rhythm, punctuated by snowflakes falling against frost-speckled windows and the faint hum of Abuela's Threads. Elvira found herself visiting Daniela at Frostbite Cafe each afternoon, the blizzard long gone but its chill lingering in the air. It was during these visits that the old woman began to speak more freely, her voice shaky at first, then steadier as the warmth of Elvira's presence encouraged her to let down the walls she had built over 6 long years. I never thought anyone would notice me again, Daniela said one afternoon, stirring her coffee with a trembling hand. The steam curled lazily in the air, fogging her glasses, and Elvira watched the small gesture as if it were sacred. After the accident, I just disappeared. My home was gone, my savings wiped out, and then the memory, some of it never came back. I could remember faces but not numbers, not names, not addresses. I didn't even remember Marcus. Elvira nodded quietly, letting her hands rest on the table, tracing the grain of the wood. It's a lot to carry, she said softly. Daniela leaned back, staring out the cafe window, her gaze distant. I taught for 35 years, you know. Math, mostly, but I loved teaching history. I loved seeing kids' eyes light up when they understood something new. But then, the accident. 4 months in a coma. And when I woke up, everything was gone. Hospital bills consumed my savings. They even took my house. I had nothing left. And for 6 years, I wandered, trying to remember, trying to reach him. Marcus. Her voice caught, and for a moment, silence wrapped the two of them like a blanket. Elvira felt a lump in her throat. She had never met someone so strong yet so quietly devastated, carrying the weight of years in her posture, in the tremor of her hands, in the ache in her voice. Have you tried looking online? Or through friends, family? She asked gently. I tried, Daniela admitted. But I remembered nothing. Not phone numbers, addresses, emails. Only his face, and even that sometimes fades. I thought, maybe he moved on without me. Elvira's mind raced. The woman sitting across from her was not just anyone in need, she was someone whose life had once shaped another life profoundly, whose absence had left a hole no one else could fill. And yet here she was, invisible to the world, surviving on the kindness of strangers, including Elvira herself. Over the next few visits, the conversation deepened. Daniela shared stories of her students, of the small victories in her classrooms, of birthdays celebrated with meager funds but great joy. She spoke of her own mother, now gone, who had taught her to cook and sew, to value each stitch as a promise, a hope, a bond. Elvira listened, drinking in every word, feeling both admiration and heartbreak. You know, Daniela said one afternoon, I created a little fund before the accident. Just a small thing to help kids in my neighborhood. I thought it would grow over the years. But, her voice faltered. Everything was lost. I never saw the money help anyone, never knew if it had done any good. And Marcus? I thought he'd be angry. Or sad. Or maybe he'd moved on entirely. Elvira's curiosity piqued. Marcus. The name sounded ordinary, but something about the way Daniela said it hinted at significance beyond a casual mention. Your son? Elvira asked cautiously. Daniela's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. Yes. Marcus. He was 12 when the accident happened. My life, my whole life, stopped the moment I lost him. I haven't seen him since. Elvira felt a flicker of determination spark inside her. She didn't yet know how, but she knew one thing, if there was any way to reconnect mother and son, she wanted to help. And yet, she reminded herself, Daniela had only enough trust in her to share pieces of her story, fragments like torn fabric waiting to be stitched together. Days turned into a quiet routine. Elvira would bring Daniela warm drinks, sometimes pastries, sometimes a sandwich. They would sit and talk for hours, slowly peeling back layers of loss, memory, and hope. Daniela spoke of the nights spent in shelters and on park benches, of the strangers who offered kindness and the ones who turned away. Elvira listened, absorbing not just the facts, but the emotions between the lines, the fear, the longing, the unwavering love for a son lost to memory. One late afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the frost-coated windows, Daniela leaned closer. Elvira, do you think someone could take the time to find me? Marcus? Even if it's impossible? Elvira's stomach tightened, the thrill of possibility mingling with the fear of disappointment. I don't know, she said honestly. But, sometimes impossible things just need someone to try. Someone to start looking. Daniela's eyes, wet with both hope and uncertainty, met Elvira's. Do you really think someone would do that, for me? I think they would, Elvira said, softly but firmly. And if they can't, maybe I'll try. For the first time in years, Daniela smiled without hesitation, a fragile, tremulous smile that carried the weight of hope. And in that moment, Elvira realized that the small $20 she had spent to feed a stranger had led to something far bigger than she could have imagined. A connection had formed, one that could change both their lives forever. Elvira returned to Abuela's threads that evening with her mind alight with possibilities. She began to think about the practicalities, computers, online searches, reaching out to networks. The snow outside had melted into streets of slush, but inside her, a storm of determination raged. If Daniela's son could be found, if this story could reach its ending, perhaps the smallest act of kindness could ripple farther than she had ever dreamed. And somewhere in the quiet of Riverside, Elvira began to imagine what it might feel like to reunite a mother with a son she thought she had lost forever. The next morning, Elvira sat at her small kitchen table, laptop open, fingers poised over the keyboard. The sunlight filtered weakly through frost-lined windows, but it offered no warmth to the nervous energy buzzing through her. Daniela's story lingered in her mind, each detail sharpening the sense of urgency. Marcus, her son, lost to memory and circumstance, was out there somewhere. And Elvira had promised to try. She began with what she knew, the name Marcus Williams, Riverside resident, roughly 40 years old now. It wasn't much to go on, but it was a start. Her heart raced as she typed the name into search engines, scrolling past dozens of unrelated results until a headline caught her eye: Marcus Williams appointed CEO of Skyline Real Estate Development. Elvira leaned closer. The photograph beneath the article showed a man in a crisp suit, standing in front of a modern office building. Confidence radiated from his posture, and yet she thought she could see traces of the boy Daniela had described, the same thoughtful gaze, the same determined set of his jaw. Her fingers trembled as she read further. The company specialized in affordable housing, projects designed to help struggling families and rebuild communities. Her mind raced. Could this be the same Marcus? Could he have taken his mother's loss and built something meaningful from it? The deeper she dug, the more she realized the truth was stranger than she could have imagined. Marcus had created a charitable initiative years ago, Daniela's Light Fund, a program dedicated to helping the homeless, the elderly, and anyone who had fallen through the cracks. The website spoke of the fund's namesake, his mother, but the details were sparse, likely because Marcus believed she had died in the accident. Elvira felt her pulse quicken. Here was a man who had turned grief into action, who had carried the memory of a mother he thought lost and created something good from it. And Daniela, alive and struggling, had never known. She cross-referenced addresses, social media profiles, and news articles. Each piece confirmed the same story: Marcus Williams was successful, influential, and deeply committed to helping others. And he had never stopped thinking of the mother he believed lost. Elvira knew she had to approach this carefully. Daniela's trust was delicate, and the truth could be overwhelming. Yet she also understood that the longer they waited, the more fragile the opportunity became. The possibility of reunion was real, and she had to act. Pulling out her phone, she drafted messages, double-checked numbers, and made a mental plan for how to reach Marcus safely and respectfully. Each tap on the screen was weighted with hope and fear. The stakes were high: one wrong word, one misstep, and the fragile hope she had nurtured with Daniela could shatter. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, she hit send. A simple message, carefully worded: "My name is Elvira Marta. I have information about your mother, Daniela Williams. She's alive, and she's been waiting to be found." Her stomach knotted. There was no turning back now. She sat back, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock, and the distant sounds of riverside streets slowly coming to life. Somewhere, Daniela was waiting. Somewhere, Marcus would read this message. And somewhere, the story that had been fractured for 6 long years was about to begin its final, transformative chapter. The message had been sent, and now all that remained was waiting. Elvira's stomach churned with nervous anticipation as she paced the small apartment above Abuela's threads. Every sound outside, footsteps crunching on icy sidewalks, the hum of traffic, the wind rattling the window panes, made her heart jump. She had no way of knowing how Marcus would respond, or if he would respond at all. Then her phone buzzed. Her breath caught in her throat. The screen displayed a name she had never expected to see: Marcus Williams. The text was brief: "I'll call now." Elvira's hands trembled as she tapped the speakerphone button. A firm, measured voice answered almost immediately, full of cautious hope. "Hello?" Marcus's voice carried both authority and an unmistakable undercurrent of emotion, the careful control of a man unused to vulnerability. "This is Elvira Marta," she said quickly, trying to steady her own shaking voice. I have your mother. Daniela Williams. She's alive. She's been waiting to be found." There was silence, a pause so long that Elvira thought the call might drop. Then a sharp intake of breath, followed by a trembling, "Alive, my mother, you're serious?" "Yes," Elvira said, her own voice cracking. "She's safe. She's here in Riverside. I can help you reach her." The line went quiet again, and Elvira imagined Marcus standing still, his mind processing what years of grief and memory loss had left him with. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice breaking. I need to see her. I need to be there." "Where is she?" Within hours, a plane touched down in Minneapolis, carrying Marcus Williams back to Riverside. Elvira waited outside Frostbite Cafe, the snow now melted into slushy streets, her coat dusted with the remnants of winter. When Marcus arrived, tall and composed, yet visibly trembling, she guided him inside. Daniela sat at the same small table where she had shared her story with Elvira. The moment Marcus saw her, recognition struck like a lightning bolt. His posture stiffened, disbelief written across his face, and then, slowly, painfully, tears filled his eyes. "Mom?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Daniela's own eyes widened, the years of fear, loss, and longing flooding back all at once. "Marcus, it's really you." Her hands reached out, trembling, and he took them immediately, holding on as if afraid to let go. For several long minutes, neither spoke. Only the sobs and the shuffling of chairs broke the silence. Finally, Marcus found his voice. I thought I lost you forever. And I thought you had moved on without me," Daniela replied, her voice breaking with years of sorrow and relief combined. I couldn't remember how to find you. I never stopped loving you." Elvira stepped back, letting them have this moment. Her heart swelled with a quiet satisfaction, a sense of awe at the human capacity for love and forgiveness. She realized that her small act of kindness, buying a warm meal for a stranger, had led to this miracle, the reunion of mother and son. Marcus wiped his tears, looking from his mother to Elvira. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, voice thick. "You've given us back a part of our lives we thought was gone forever." Elvira shook her head, a small smile on her lips. "Sometimes, all it takes is seeing someone. Being there for them, even when it's hard." That evening, over a quiet dinner arranged by Elvira, the three of them shared stories, laughter, and tears. Marcus spoke of the years he spent building Skyline Real Estate and the Daniela's Light Fund, revealing that every project, every act of charity, had been inspired by the memory of the mother he believed lost. Daniela listened, awe and pride shining through her exhausted eyes. Elvira realized that the spark of hope she had carried in her heart, the tiny flame of compassion she had offered in a blizzard, had ignited something far greater. Not only had she changed Daniela's life, but she had also brought together a family, healed old wounds, and set the stage for further acts of kindness to ripple outward. And as the evening drew on, with Riverside streetlights casting a soft glow through the windows, Elvira understood that this reunion was more than just a moment. It was a beginning, a transformation, not only for Daniela and Marcus, but for herself as well. Because in helping someone in need, she had discovered the extraordinary power of human connection. She had seen that even the smallest gestures, when offered with sincerity and courage, could reshape lives forever. And somewhere in the quiet of that evening, a new chapter had begun, one stitched together with hope, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of kindness. The reunion had changed everything. Marcus returned to Riverside with Daniela by his side, their bond renewed and their hearts mended, but the ripple effect of that one act of kindness extended far beyond their personal joy. Elvira watched quietly as her small gesture, the $20 meal in a snow-filled cafe, transformed not only lives, but an entire community. Marcus, moved by the discovery of his mother alive and by the integrity of the young seamstress who had connected them, immediately offered Elvira a partnership she had never dared to imagine. 5 years of rent-free space in a newly built community hub, funding to launch a sewing and training program for homeless and unemployed individuals, and a full scholarship for Sophia to attend the college she had been denied, all became tangible realities. The numbers she had once calculated with anxiety now shifted into a world of possibility. Elvira could hardly believe it as she walked into the new hub for the first time. Bright, open spaces replaced the cramped, drafty corners of Abuela's Threads. Light streamed through wide windows, glinting on freshly polished wooden floors. Tables were lined with sewing machines, shelves stocked with fabric, thread, and supplies. And in the center, a plaque read, Abuela's Threads Community Center, a place where every stitch is an act of hope. Within weeks, 50 students had enrolled in the program, each one carrying their own story of hardship. Some were homeless, some unemployed, and some simply seeking a creative outlet to rebuild their lives. Elvira guided them patiently, teaching not only how to sew, but how to persevere, how to find dignity in work, and how to extend kindness even when it seemed they had nothing to give. Sophia thrived in college, her confidence restored and her dreams finally taking shape. Yet even she remarked that her sister's generosity had taught her a lesson far more valuable than any scholarship could provide: the importance of seeing others, of acting despite fear or scarcity, and of believing that one person's compassion could shift the course of many lives. Marcus remained actively involved with the Daniela's Light Fund, now collaborating with Elvira to identify individuals and families who could benefit from training, job opportunities, and support. The community watched as hope began to spread in ways no one had anticipated. Small acts of kindness multiplied, and Riverside slowly transformed. Neighbors who had ignored each other before now volunteered time, donated materials, and shared skills. The spirit of generosity moved through the town like sunlight after a long winter. And yet, Elvira never sought recognition. She continued to work quietly, teaching, mentoring, and supporting, often slipping away to check on Daniela or help someone struggling in a nearby shelter. Every stitch she sewed, every lesson she taught, carried the memory of that first snowy day, the day she chose compassion over convenience. In her quieter moments, she thought of the line her grandmother had once told her: "Every stitch is an act of hope." The words echoed differently now. They were no longer a metaphor for sewing alone, they were a reflection of life itself. Each act of kindness, each choice to see another human being, could bind lives together in ways unimaginable. One afternoon, as Elvira supervised a small group of students learning to patch coats for a local shelter, Daniela approached her, smiling. "You changed my life, Elvira," she said, her voice steady with gratitude. "And now, you're changing so many others. I can't thank you enough." Elvira shook her head, brushing stray strands of hair from her face. "You don't have to thank me. You just had to believe someone would help. That was all." Daniela's eyes glistened. "No, it's more than that. You acted. You risked what little you had to help someone else. That courage, it sparked everything that followed." Elvira smiled softly. The community center buzzed around them, students laughing, sewing machines humming, coats being repaired and donated. Each sound, each movement, was a testament to the power of small, deliberate acts of kindness. The storm of hardship that had once dominated her life had given way to a steady rhythm of hope, connection, and growth. And in Riverside, Minnesota, a new legacy had been stitched into the very fabric of the town, a legacy born of a single, selfless act. One act of seeing, of caring, of choosing compassion over fear. And now, it would continue, carried forward by every hand willing to make the world a little brighter, one stitch, one gesture, one life at a time. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.